I want to start with a locker. Not a dramatic locker. Not the kind that appears in movies, the slammed locker, the love note falling out, the specific cinematic shorthand of teenage romance announcing itself. A specific locker. Number 247. Third floor of Jefferson High School in Richmond, Virginia. On the left side of the hallway that connected the science wing to the main building, third from the end, with a small dent in the lower left corner that had been there since at least freshman year and that nobody had ever explained. That locker belonged to a boy named Ethan. And I spent the better part of my junior year of high school walking past it more slowly than I needed to. Not because I was dramatic. Because Ethan Hayes was always at that locker between second and third period, and the hallway was wide enough that walking past required no interaction but narrow enough that walking past was still present. I was present at locker 247 approximately 4 times a week for 8 months. Ethan noticed on week 3. He did not say anything for another 2 weeks. And then on a Tuesday morning in October he was at his locker and I was walking past and he said without turning around, "You walk slower here than anywhere else in the building." I stopped. He turned around. He had the specific, unhurried look of someone who has said exactly what they intended to say and is waiting to see what happens next. I said, "I have a heavy backpack." He looked at my backpack. He looked at me. He said, "You are carrying the same backpack on the days you walk fast." I said, "It is heavier on some days." He said, "It is the same backpack." I said, "The contents vary." He looked at me for a long moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved. Not a full smile. The specific, contained thing that happens on someone's face when they find something genuinely amusing and are trying not to show it completely. He said, "I am Ethan." I said, "I know." He said, "What is your name?" I said, "Lily." He said, "Lily." Just that. My name. In his voice. The specific quality of someone trying a word for the first time and finding it fits. The bell rang. We went to our separate classes. And everything that followed was the result of that Tuesday morning. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and drop your country and local time in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you all the way back. Underscore 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 underscore. My name is Lily Monroe. I am 27 years old. And the story I am about to tell you is the story of a love that started at 17 in a school hallway and that ended when we were 20 and that came back 10 years later in a way I was not prepared for and that has not stopped surprising me since. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. My parents are the kind of people who made growing up feel safe in the specific way that safety matters. Not the absence of difficulty but the presence of people who would be there when the difficulty arrived. My father is an architect. My mother is a librarian. I grew up between blueprints and books. Between structure and story. Between the precision of how things are built and the imagination of what things could mean. I was a specific kind of teenager. Not the popular kind, not unpopular either. The kind that exists in the middle space of high school with a small number of close friends and a large number of books, and the specific, searching quality of someone who is 17 years old and is trying to understand the shape of what she is supposed to become. I was searching. I had been searching my entire adolescence. I did not find what I was searching for in Jefferson High School's cafeteria or at the football games I occasionally attended or in the specific social architecture of junior year. I found it, or the beginning of it, at locker 247. Underscore 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 underscore. Ethan Hayes. I want to tell you who Ethan was before I tell you who we were together, because the who of him is the only way to understand the who of us. He was 17 years old. He was the kind of boy who read. Not performed reading, actually read, with the specific absorbed quality of someone who disappears into books rather than displaying them. He carried whatever he was currently reading in the front pocket of his backpack, and he read in the spaces between things, in the 5 minutes before class started, at lunch when the cafeteria was too loud for conversation, in the specific, stolen moments of a school day that most people fill with phones. He was quiet without being withdrawn. There is a specific difference between those two things that most people do not recognize and that I recognized immediately because I was also quiet without being withdrawn. He thought before he spoke. Not the careful, managed thinking of someone who is monitoring their words. The genuine thinking of someone who wants to say the true thing rather than the first thing. He played guitar. Not in the performative, impressing people at parties way of teenagers who have learned 3 chords and consider themselves musicians. In the private way. He played in his room. I did not know this until month 2. He told me almost accidentally. He had 2 close friends, Marcus and Jordan, and a relationship with those 2 friends that had the specific, easy quality of people who have known each other long enough that they do not need to perform for each other. He was the second of 3 children. Older sister, younger brother. His mother was a teacher. His father was a contractor who worked long hours and who compensated for the long hours with the specific, deliberate quality of his presence when he was home. He was, at 17, one of the most genuine people I had ever met. Genuine in the specific sense of someone who is the same person in every context, in the hallway and in the classroom and with his friends and eventually, slowly, with me. Underscore 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 underscore. After the Tuesday morning at locker 247, things progressed with the specific, gradual pace of 2 people who are not in a rush. Not because either of us was playing a game. Because neither of us was in a rush. The next day I walked past the locker at the same pace. He was there. He did not say anything. He looked at me as I passed and the corner of his mouth moved again, and I looked back and kept walking. Thursday, he said, still the heavy backpack? I said, the contents are particularly dense today. He said, what subject? I said, all of them simultaneously. He almost smiled. The week after that he said, what are you reading? I was carrying a book in addition to the backpack. I was always carrying a book in addition to the backpack. I showed him the cover. He looked at it. He said, how is it? I said, better than expected. He said, that is the best kind. I said, yes. The week after that he was reading something when I walked past and he held it up without looking up from it so I could see the cover. I looked at it. I said, I read that in 8th grade. He looked up. He said, and? I said, it changes when you are older. He said, how old were you in 8th grade? I said, 13. He said, you are 17 now. Yes, I said. He said, come back and tell me how it changes. I said, come find me when you finish it. He looked at me. He said, where do you eat lunch? I told him. He came the next day. Underscore 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 underscore. Lunch became the thing. Not immediately. The first time he came he sat with Marcus and Jordan at a nearby table and we acknowledged each other from a distance and it was enough. The second time he came alone. He sat across from me. He said, I finished the book. I said, already? He said, I read fast when something is worth reading. I said, how did it change? He thought about it. Not quickly. With the genuine considering quality I had already learned was how he did things. He said, it is sadder at 17 than it was at whatever age I read it before. When I was younger I read it as a story about someone else. Now I read it as a story about something that could happen. I looked at him. I said, that is exactly how it changes. He said, you knew it would. I said, yes. He said, how? I said, because at 13 you are inside the story. At 17 you are beside it. You can see it from the outside. The outside view is always sadder. He was quiet for a moment. He said, that is a very specific way of thinking about books. I said, I have a very specific relationship with books. He said, tell me. And I told him. I told him about growing up between blueprints and books. About my mother's library and the specific way she had of making books feel like places you could go rather than things you had to get through. About the books that had changed me and the ones that had confused me and the ones I had returned to multiple times because I understood them differently each time. He listened. With the specific quality of listening I have described, the genuine receiving of what was being said. When I finished he said, you read the way I play guitar. I said, how do you play guitar? He said, privately. Like it is mine and not for anyone else. I said, yes. That is how I read. He said, those are the best things. What things? I said. He said, the things that are yours before they are anyone else's. I looked at him across the lunch table. I said, yes. Underscore 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 underscore. November. By November we had been eating lunch together every day for 3 weeks. His friends Marcus and Jordan came sometimes. My friend Sophie came sometimes. But mostly it was just the two of us and the lunch table and the specific, daily accumulation of conversations that were becoming something. I did not know exactly what they were becoming. I knew they were becoming something. November was the month he came to the library. My mother's school library, and not our school library, the elementary school library 3 blocks away where my mother had worked for 12 years and where I had spent more time than anywhere else in my childhood. I had mentioned it once at lunch. The way you mention the things that shaped you without fully thinking about the mentioning. He had listened. 2 weeks later he said, "Can I come?" I said, "To the library?" He said, "To the place that is yours." I looked at him. I said, "It is a children's library." He said, "I know." I said, "You want to go to an elementary school library on a Saturday afternoon?" He said, "I want to see the place that made you who you are." I held that for a moment. Then I said, "Saturday afternoon." He said, "Saturday afternoon." Underscore 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 underscore. We went on a Saturday. My mother was there. She looked up when we came in and she looked at Ethan and she looked at me and her face did the specific thing that mothers' faces do when they understand something without being told. She said, "Ethan, it is nice to meet you." He said, "Mrs. Monroe, your library is incredible." She said, "It is just books." He said, "The organization is what matters. The way you have arranged it, by mood rather than genre. I have not seen that before." She looked at him. She looked at me. She said, "I like him." I said, "Mom." She said, "I am just noting." Ethan looked at me. He said, "Noted." I laughed. He smiled. The full smile. Not the contained corner thing. The full one. It was the first time I had seen the full one. December. The specific, accumulating warmth of December between two 17-year-olds who have not yet said the thing they are both thinking. He came to the library 2 more times. He brought me a book in the first week of December. Left it at the lunch table with a note that said only, page 47. I thought of you. I went home and read to page 47. On page 47 there was a sentence that said, "She read the way other people breathed, not for pleasure or achievement but because the alternative was impossible." I sat with that sentence for a long time. Then I texted him. I said, "You thought of me on page 47. He said, "First time I read it I thought, I will know her someday." I did not know who. Then I met you. I held the phone. Then I said, "That might be the most specific thing anyone has ever said to me." He said, "You deserve specific things." Underscore 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 underscore. He told me he liked me on a Wednesday. Not dramatically. Not with a speech or a gesture. We were walking after school, not together intentionally, we had ended up walking in the same direction and had continued walking together in the specific way of 2 people who do not want the walking to end. We stopped at the corner where our paths diverged. He said, "Lily." I said, "What?" He said, "I like you." Just that. Not, "I think I like you." Not, "This might be weird but." Not the managed, hedged version of something that requires management and hedging. "I like you." I looked at him. I said, "I like you too." He said, "Okay." I said, "Okay." He said, "I will see you tomorrow." I said, "I will walk slowly past locker 247. He almost smiled. He did smile. He turned and walked away. I stood at the corner for a moment. Then I walked home. And I felt, for the first time in 17 years of living, the specific, clarifying sensation of knowing exactly where you are. Underscore 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 underscore. We were together from December of junior year through the spring of senior year. 18 months. I want to tell you about those 18 months not in the romantic montage way that time sometimes gets described but in the specific, honest way of something that was real. We talked every day. Not because we had to, because we wanted to. The specific distinction between obligation and desire that is easy to confuse and that we never confused. He came to my house on Sunday afternoons and we sat in the living room and read, separately, side by side, in the comfortable quiet of two people who can be together without requiring the togetherness to be performed. My father liked him. In the specific way my father likes people, he asked Ethan real questions and listened to the real answers and did not ask the questions again. His mother liked me. She told me once, in the kitchen of their house on a Saturday, that Ethan had told her I read the way he played guitar and that she had understood immediately what he meant. We argued sometimes. Not often. But sometimes. The specific arguments of two people who are both strong-minded and who care enough about each other to say the true thing even when the true thing is uncomfortable. We argued about things that mattered and we repaired them because the things that mattered were worth the repairing. He played guitar for me in April. Not publicly. In his room. With the door closed and his parents out and the specific, private quality of something that had been his before it was anyone else's. He played for 20 minutes. When he finished I did not say anything for a moment. He said, "Well?" I said, "That is the most private thing anyone has ever shared with me." He said, "It is yours now too." Underscore 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 underscore. Senior year. The specific, bittersweet quality of a year that everyone knows is ending. We had applied to different colleges. Not because we did not talk about it, we did talk about it. But because we had both applied to the schools that were right for each of us and the schools that were right for each of us were not in the same city. Me, University of Virginia. Literature. The obvious choice for a girl raised between blueprints and books. Him, Carnegie Mellon. Computer science. The obvious choice for a boy who read privately and thought before he spoke and wanted to build things precisely. Richmond to Charlottesville. 1 hour and 40 minutes. Richmond to Pittsburgh. 5 hours. We talked about it. Not with the specific, romantic certainty of teenagers who believe that love conquers all practical distances. With the honest uncertainty of two people who loved each other and who understood that the honest answer to what happens next was we do not know. We graduated in June. The summer between high school and college was the summer I will always think of as ours. The specific, precious, slightly desperate quality of a summer that both people know is ending and that both people are trying to be fully inside rather than already grieving. We went everywhere. Not literally everywhere. But everywhere that was ours, the library, the corner where our paths diverged, the lunch table that now existed only in memory, the room where he had played guitar for me. We were trying to memorize each other. Not for the goodbye. For the after. Underscore 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 underscore. August. Move-in weekend. He drove me to Charlottesville. 5 hours would be my drive to Pittsburgh for him. 1 hour 40 was his drive to me. He drove me to Charlottesville. He helped me carry boxes. He met my roommate. He stood in my dorm room with the specific, quiet quality of someone who is being fully present for something they know is a transition. Then the transition arrived. It was time for him to drive back. We stood in the parking lot of the dorm. He said, "I will call tonight." I said, "I will answer." He said, "Every Sunday." I said, "Every Sunday." He looked at me. He said, "Lily." I said, "I know." "I do not want to say goodbye," he said. I said, "Then do not. Say I will see you." He looked at me. He said, "I will see you." "I will see you," I said. He hugged me. The specific, long, full-body hug of someone who is memorizing the shape of another person. Then he got in his car. He drove away. I stood in the parking lot until his car was not visible anymore. Then I went inside. Underscore 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 underscore. Freshman year. I want to be honest about freshman year. The calls happened every Sunday. The visits happened twice in the fall semester, once in the spring. But freshman year does something to people. Not to everyone. But to us. Not dramatically. Gradually. We were becoming different people. Not worse people. Just people who were developing in the specific, individual directions of their own lives and who were finding that the directions, while not incompatible, required more of both of them than either had fully understood. He was deep in computer science, the specific, consuming depth of someone who has found the thing they were built for and who is inside it completely. I was in literature courses that were changing the way I thought about language and story and meaning in ways that I could describe to him but that he could not fully inhabit because he had not had the same experiences. We were still ourselves. We were also becoming new versions of ourselves. And the new versions had less overlap than the previous versions. Not because we had stopped loving each other. Because love, in the first year of two people becoming who they are going to be, sometimes does not cover the specific distance between the becoming. Underscore 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 underscore. We broke up in February of sophomore year. Not with a fight. Not with betrayal. Not with the dramatic, visible break of something that has gone wrong. With the specific, honest recognition of two people who love each other and who have understood something true. He called on a Sunday in February. Not the scheduled Sunday call. A specific call. He said, "Lily." I said, "I know." He said, "Do you?" I said, "We are becoming people who need more space for the becoming than we have been giving each other." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is exactly what I was trying to find words for." I said, "I know." He said, "This is not about not loving you." I said, "I know." He said, "I do not want to stop talking to you." I said, "I do not want to stop talking to you either." He said, "Is that possible? After this?" I said, "I do not know." He said, "What do we do?" I said, "I think we become who we are going to be. And we trust that the people we become will know what to do with what we were to each other." He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "That is the most honest thing you have ever said." I said, "It is the hardest." He said, "I know." We said goodbye. Not, "I will see you." Goodbye. The real one. Underscore 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 underscore. The years. 7 years. I will not give you the full accounting of 7 years because 7 years is a life and a life is not an accounting. I will tell you the shape of them. I graduated from UVA. I went to graduate school for English literature at Georgetown. I wrote my thesis on the specific way that certain novels change when you read them at different ages. The outside view is always sadder, and I thought about Ethan every time I sat with that idea. I taught as a graduate instructor. I published a small piece in a literary journal. I got a job at a publishing house in New York. I had relationships. 2 significant ones. One that lasted 2 years and that I valued genuinely, and that ended because the specific shape of what we wanted was not the same shape. One that lasted 8 months and that I ended because I understood something about what I was looking for that this person was not. I thought about Ethan sometimes. Not with the longing of someone who cannot let go. With the specific, warm, slightly wondering quality of someone who has a good thing in their past and who holds it carefully. I held it carefully. He existed in my past. I did not know what he existed in his present. Then the doorbell rang. underscore 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 underscore. A Saturday afternoon in April. I was 27 years old. I was in my apartment in New York, a small apartment in Brooklyn that I had lived in for 2 years and that had the specific, accumulated quality of a space that is genuinely yours. Books everywhere. A desk by the window. The specific domestic architecture of someone who lives alone and has organized the space around what she actually needs. The doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. I went to the door. I opened it. Ethan Hayes was standing on the other side. 27 years old. The same quiet eyes. The same quality of someone who thinks before he speaks. Taller than I remembered, or I had forgotten the specific height of him. Wearing the same kind of clothes he had always worn, simple, thoughtful, the specific casualness of someone who does not require the clothing to perform. He was holding something. A book. The same book he had left on the lunch table in December of junior year with the note that said page 47. I thought of you. He held it out. He said, page 112. I looked at him. I said, Ethan. He said, I know this is. I said, how did you find my address? He said, Sophie. Sophie. My friend from high school. Who had stayed in Richmond. Who had apparently given my address to a person from my past without telling me. I said, Sophie. He said, she said you would want me to come. I said, did she? He said, she said, and I am quoting directly, she said she would never forgive herself if she did not give me the address because some things are too important to stay in the past. I held the door frame. I said, what is on page 112? He said, will you let me in? I looked at him. I stepped back. He came in. He stood in my apartment and he looked at the books everywhere and the desk by the window and the specific, accumulated evidence of who I had become in 7 years. He said, you read the way you always read. I said, privately. He said, like it is yours. I said, yes. He held out the book. I took it. I opened to page 112. There was a sentence underlined. It said, she had been looking for the one who would see the outside view and find it not sadder but more beautiful, because the outside view meant you had lived enough to see from there. I read it twice. Then I looked up. He was looking at me. He said, I had been thinking about us, about what we were, for 7 years. Not constantly. Not in the way of someone who cannot move forward. But in the way of someone who understands that what we had was the realest thing and who has been waiting to understand what to do with that understanding. I held the book. What did you understand? I said. He said that the people we were becoming, the people we needed to be before we could be anything, we have been becoming them. For 7 years. And I have become who I needed to become. And I think, I believe, that you have too. I said, you came to my door in Brooklyn to tell me that. He said, I came to your door in Brooklyn to ask you something. I said, ask. He said, the outside view. Can we see it together? I looked at him. At the 27-year-old version of the boy who had noticed I walked slowly past locker 247. Who had said page 47. I thought of you. Who had played guitar for me in his room and said it is yours now too. I said, you drove from Pittsburgh to Brooklyn to ask me that. He said, 6 hours. I said, that is a very long drive. He said, you are worth a 6-hour drive. I held the book. I looked at page 112. I looked at him. I said, come in. I mean, actually come in. Sit down. I will make coffee. He said, okay. I said, and then you are going to tell me everything that happened in 7 years. He said, everything? I said, I have time. He sat down. He looked at my books. He picked one up. He said, is this good? I said, better than expected. He looked up. He said, that is the best kind. I stood in my kitchen making coffee and I felt the specific thing I had felt at 17 at the corner where our paths diverged. The clarifying sensation of knowing exactly where I was. Underscore 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 underscore. That was 7 months ago. He lives in Pittsburgh. I live in Brooklyn. 4 hours and 20 minutes. We are managing the shape. Not perfectly. Not without the specific difficulties of two people whose lives have been built separately for 7 years and who are now trying to build something that connects them across 4 hours and 20 minutes. But genuinely. With the specific, deliberate quality of two people who understand that what they have is worth the difficulty of the maintaining. He comes to Brooklyn. I go to Pittsburgh. We read side by side when we are together, separately, in the comfortable quiet, the way we did on Sunday afternoons in his living room when we were 17. He plays guitar for me. Still privately. Not publicly. The private thing is still private. But it is mine again. It has always been mine. I think about that Saturday in April sometimes. About the doorbell and the book in page 112. About the 6-hour drive. About Sophie who gave him my address because some things are too important to stay in the past. And I think about this. Some loves are not love stories. They are love educations. They teach you what love is before you are ready to keep it. And the specific, profound gift of a love education is this. When you are finally ready, when you have become who you needed to become to hold it properly, the thing you learned from does not always stay in the past. Sometimes it rings your doorbell on a Saturday in April. And it holds a book. And it asks if you can see the outside view together. And the answer is yes. The answer is always yes. Underscore 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 underscore. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever loved someone at the wrong time? Have you ever let something go not because it was not real but because the timing of it was not yet right? And have you ever had the specific, rare, completely unexpected experience of the wrong time becoming the right time? Drop the word page in the comments if this story reached something real in you. Page for page 47. Page for page 112. Page for every chapter of a love story that takes longer than expected to arrive at its real beginning. And if you are new here, subscribe. Every single day I share a new story about love, about family, about the people who found each other twice. I will see you in the next one. Kayla's Dark Truth.